customize that bike myself. It's too wild for you to handle. Yep, this week, Rob and I are covering the quintessential Japanese anime, one of the most influential movies of my lifetime, a movie that introduced manga and anime to the West, and for me at least, felt like a movie that, well, came from the future. To this day, I'd argue that there is nothing quite like Katsuhiro Otomo's Akira, but back in 1988, it was an utter revelation on both a technical and an artistic level. And Rob, I think you saw it for the first time yesterday.
Yeah,
which is
it's
something else.
It's quite funny that you say the future, considering it's set in the distant future of 2019 as we watch it.
Yeah,
now.
It's an odd one because I mean it has that really dramatic, like a fantastic intro, like that cold intro of just that spectacular nuclear explosion.
I wanted to say this.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say visually, this film is stunning for a 1988 animation. The animation from the 80s does age up to a certain point, but this looks absolutely beautiful. It does look great, and that opening, I had because the silence of everything, even the explosion, where you're just getting the thump, 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 and not an actual explosion. It's It's beautiful. It does look.
Yeah, it's weird to say a nuclear explosion, or what they think is a nuclear explosion at least, would be beautiful. But that's what it is. And it's a ballsy move to open with that. And as you say about the animation, I mean, it really hasn't aged today. Considering this was all done with cell technology, this was obviously well before computers. Yeah. But, this was I think it was the first Japanese animated film anyway, to use I think many scenes actually use 24 pictures per second, which is up there with like the high quality you'd associate with, say, Disney. I think a lot of people before Akira, when they thought of Japanese animation, they probably thought of especially in the West, you probably thought of Speed Racer, the stuff where you get hardly any actual movement. A lot of it was just still frames, and you just have the mouse moving.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden to get this, and I don't think you can overestimate the cultural shock and impact that this film had, because this is obviously before the internet, and for many people, myself included, this film fell out of the sky. And you've got to think, we lived in a world where, especially when you thought of full-length feature films, animated films were for kids, 100%. When we thought of animated films, we thought of Disney films.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, you get Akira, and you get very adult tones.
When you say animated films for kids as well, this is 2 hours and 4 minutes, this film.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus Christ. If it was for kids, it'd be a solid 70 minutes. But again, this is not for kids. I will stress that straight away. This is not for kids.
This is 100% not for kids.
So you've already said it. This is my first viewing of it.
Mm-hmm.
So off the bat, I've already said that visually, it looks stunning. And it is fun to watch. But I wasn't a fan of the story. I'll give you that. Straight away.
Okay, yeah, which I can understand.
It dragged itself in places it didn't need to drag. It had too many things going on, which all culminate into one. They're trying to. There's this magic of these weird dwarf little telekinetic kids. These grey little things running around. They want to escape, but they don't want to escape. They turn into giant teddy bears covered in jizz.
Yeah, there is that. That's definitely something that happens.
It's just, there's a lot going on, especially one of them can run around and disappear. One of them is in a weird floating chair. He looks a bit like MODOK from Marvel. Then you've got the one girl who's in a bubble, and they're not really explaining what's going on with them. And aside from that, then you've got who I always thought was named Akira, for a guy who never watched this film, but his name is Canada. No, Canada.
Yeah,
I butchered that. Canada. So I always thought he was Akira. It turns out you see Akira for 15 seconds, if that.
Yeah.
And but there is a lot going on. It is, and I think it can be, it can be condensed. But I won't take away from the fact, as I've already said, that it looks so beautiful. And it just, the one thing I wrote down, the one thing that really captured me was when their first motorcycle battle.
Yeah,
when
with
they
the clowns.
speed off. Yeah. But as any motorcycle battle, when they speed off, but you've got the trail of the tail lights, the trail off behind them. That is gorgeous.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's one of those things.
Yeah.
Even if you don't enjoy the film, from a purely, I would argue that Akira can be enjoyed on an almost purely aesthetic level.
Which is how I enjoyed it. I'll tell you right now, I enjoyed it aesthetically.
Yeah, because even, if we go beyond the impressiveness of the animation, whether it be for 1988 or even by today's standards, it really is the artistic design which kind of elevates it, which makes it so memorable. It's Canada's bike. It's that moment when he has the face-off with the clown and he skids past him, and it's the coolest skid in movie history, without question.
Yeah,
that bike is covered. Super iconic.
I've got that in fact, but that's been covered, or not covered. What is it when you do some an homage? Yeah. So that's there's
a
number of films that have done that. Yeah.
The thing is, nobody has been able to recreate Akira, and arguably Akira, and I guess there's a point, didn't manage to recreate Akira because of what it's based upon. But there's so many visual and aesthetic motifs in this film which have become part of popular culture and has been taken on by the West. And you see it in music videos, you see it in video games, you see it obviously in movies. It's led, there's no doubt that, The Matrix owes a huge debt to its creation, to its design, to Akira. But what you said in terms of obviously the pacing of the film and the fact that maybe there's a bit too much going on, I mean, that is definitely true. I mean, when I was younger, obviously this film, the first time I watched it, I was probably 9 years old, probably a bit too young. Wow. But I enjoyed it purely on an aesthetic level. But I saw so many times that my understanding of the film built up. And it's a film which does benefit from...
This is definitely a film that has to grow with you, I think. Because as you watch it as a kid, like you say, you watch it aesthetically, but as you're growing up then and you've watched it a couple more viewings, you're starting to get the different layers, the different nuances that they're trying to bring out the film. And from what I can gather, this film was finished before the manga actually finished as well, didn't it?
Well, yeah, that's the biggest issue, arguably, with this film is its connection and relationship with the manga. The manga was also written by Katsuhiro Otomo. It was started in 1982, but was actually finished in 1990, 2 years after the film was made. So, of course, they kind of have this weird intersecting relationship with each other. Kind of like, all I can think of it is like an 80s equivalent of Game of Thrones. Yeah, but just imagine George R.R. Martin was both making the show and writing the book at the same time. It's a weird setup, and obviously the manga invariably influenced the anime, but then the success of the anime then later influenced the closing of the manga. So it's weird relationship, but you can't get away from the fact that as good as this film is, there are large parts of it which don't make a huge amount of sense because it's just not given enough time to breathe. Yeah. And it's because basically, I mean, this is based on a 6-volume, 2,000-page manga.
Am I right in saying you own the manga?
Yes, I do. Yeah. And the manga is very good, but like Akira is a much larger player. A lot of characters that you see in this film, specifically in the middle section, the saggiest bit of the film, undoubtedly, they all come from the manga, but they're given very short shrift in this film for obvious reasons because they just don't have enough time.
They hint that Kai has a much larger purpose, but they don't
which he does in the manga.
But they don't seem to get, like, you got the 3 little imps. I'm going to call them for the rest. The
Espers.
Sorry,
they're called the Espers.
The Espers, okay. I missed that. I'm just calling them imps. But the Espers.
Oh, well, I'm not even sure if they refer to them as Espers in the movie. Okay. But that is what they're known as. The 3 Espers and Akira.
They hint that Kai has a much larger role, and that's why she was saved at the end. But there's a hint. But again, she just kind of falls through the cracks with this as well, a little bit.
Well, because the thing is, this film is at its best when it's keeping the emphasis on the relationship between Kaneda and Tetsuo. Because really, you add in all the superpowers that Tetsuo get, but really it's about a fragile kid who has, confidence issues. And it's all about that kind of strained but close relationship. The relationship is built on shared experiences.
Yeah.
But they're very different people. And obviously, as Kaneda clearly has a lot of affection for Tetsuo, but there's no two ways about the fact that Tetsuo lacks confidence, and he's just not as cool as Kaneda. And Kaneda's got all the confidence in the world. He's got the red bike, the red jacket. He just looks the shit. And despite all the power that Tetsuo gets, and he keeps talking about the fact that he wants more power, really all he wants to do is impress and arguably show he has that weird relationship that you can have with a friend who's better looking than you, more talented than you. It's like you want to impress him, but you also want to get the better of it. And that's what it becomes about. All this power, and all he wants to do is put one over on his best friend. And I think that's when the film is at its strongest. And that's very much the first act and the final act. And in the middle act, when they and obviously this runs throughout the whole film, but they have these underlying narratives of disaffected youth, government corruption, religious zealotry, the after effects of nuclear war. All of these things are covered in great detail, obviously, in the manga. And it's like they've got these characters and these themes, and it's like they're loath to let them go for the anime, for the movie, but there's no time. You can't fucking do it.
That government corruption that you just said, that was the one thing that really kind of ticked me off whilst watching this, due to the fact that it wasn't needed. Like you've got these rebels. Turns out they're not rebels; they're actually working for the government because the government are trying to get rid of the general, but the general has a coup. But none of that shit was needed for this. You could have just cut that out.
It isn't. I see what you mean. Like you could have just like, it could be a lighter touch for sure. But I guess and again, it keeps coming back to the manga and the fact that it's got more to work with. But you've got it's a very cynical take on society, basically, because you've got Netsu, the politician. You've got Dr. Inishi, who covers science. You've got the colonel, who represents the military. You've arguably got Ryu and Kei, who kind of represent, greater humanity and the rebellion that comes with it in terms of everyday people. So you've got all these major forms of established society, which are covered by these characters, and none of them come off particularly well. All of the, it is a very cynical view on all of these different aspects of humanity and, as I say, modern or whatever, futuristic society. And again, it's all these big ideas. But we'll keep coming back to the fact that there's just not enough movie to cover this. I mean, you would like to think if this was made now, this would be a 10-part Netflix series. Because really, that's what it needs to be.
It needs to be a series. It does need to be a series. Because it is making me chuckle that you keep saying there's not enough movie to cover everything. And I appreciate I haven't read the manga, so I'll go with you on that.
Well, it's
the fact that this is 2 hours long, and it feels like 3 hours.
Well, yeah, I get it, because the problem is this story, it's like the first half of there's 6 volumes, very large volumes of manga. This movie most clearly is covered by the first half of the volume 1, the final half of volume 6, and then they just kind of muddle together a story made up of bits and bobs of the rest of it. So the second half of 1, 2 through 5, and the first half of 6 is all kind of condensed clumsily into a 40-minute section in the middle. And the only thing I can compare it to, and another one which didn't work, was they tried to do a similar thing with the Dark Tower movie, where instead of it being a 10-part series, they basically, or instead of going, okay, we're just going to tell the story of 1 book at a time, they tried to tell the story of 6 books in a 90-minute movie. And that didn't work out. This is a much better movie.
Yeah, and then they got a magic laser to shoot at the Dark Tower. Again, this
we don't. This won't become the Dark Tower.
I know we'll cover the end because I do. There is a bit I want to talk about at the beginning of this film, and I know we'll cover a lot of the final battle as well. I just want to mention the irony of us covering Akira at the moment, due to the fact that it's set in Neo Tokyo, in the unfinished Olympic stadium that they were going to hold for the Japanese the Olympics, which were going to be in Japan. At the same time as we record this, that 2020 Olympics are happening right now in Japan.
It's quite bizarre, and as I said, this really is, to my mind at least, certainly from a Western perspective, this still remains the quintessential, not only, I would say, Japanese anime, I would argue Japanese movie full stop. And it's arguably the most influential Japanese export of all time. I mean, when you think of those really impactful movies in particular, you think of Rashomon, you think of Seven Samurai, maybe Tokyo Story, and in latter years, like turn of the millennium, you think of like the J-horror boom. Like, The Ring was absolutely massive.
Yeah.
But in terms of a lasting legacy, I don't think there's anything else quite like
this is
Akira.
A film that was credited for getting Western cinema into, or Western audiences, into.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And this came at a time, you've got to, put this into perspective in Japan as well as over here. This came at a time of unprecedented economic growth in Japan. This was very much made at the height of the economic boom in the late 80s, very early 90s in Japan. So all of a sudden, you've got these companies, they've got so much money, which allowed them to put, this money cost an outrageous amount, especially by Japanese animation standards. And I'm not sure if this film gets made in another era. You've got these animators who have 20 years of experience. They've suddenly got all this money, but there's no expectations that come with it. There's no like fan groups or anything. You have to make this kind of movie. This is pure kind of not autism, altruistic design. I'm not sure if that's the correct term, but you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
But these completely singular visions, but provided with massive budgets. And of course, from our perspective, we're getting this completely out of the blue. Again, obviously, you were aware of this before you saw it, but from my perspective, I was 9 years old. It was a bunch of kids, well, slightly older than us, who lived across our back garden, basically when we were younger. And one of them was an art student. And he just said to us one day, he gave me the VHS, and he was like, you have to watch this. And he checked with my mum first because he's like 9 years old. But as we already know, my mum was just like, dude, you can watch whatever you want. It was fine.
Plus, it looked like a cartoon.
And it looked like a cartoon. So you got to think, I'm putting this on. No build up. I've just got handed this VHS. And when I think of cartoons, I still thought of fucking Disney. That was it. That's what I thought of. And Saturday afternoon cartoons. And suddenly I get this. This was one of the most impactful films I've ever seen in my life. Did I get it all at the time? Absolutely not. But did I love it? And did it lead on, like so many other people, what it led to was a brief, I'll admit it, obsession with Japanese animation. And the weird thing for you is that you didn't watch this, but you watched all the films.
I watched everything around it.
Yeah, well, everyone else watched Akira and then, holy shit, I want to see more of this. And then they went out and watched Fist of the North Star, Ninja Scroll, Neon Genesis Evangelion. Later on, I guess it'd be Ghost in the Shell and maybe even Studio Ghibli. Yeah. You just skipped this and went straight to all the other shit.
So Fist of the North Star was my foray into this art form, should we say.
And the ultra-violent Fist of the North Star.
Yeah. And that's what got me into it. I think it's like a 2 a.m. viewing on Sci-Fi, because Sci-Fi used to do, when we were younger, Sci-Fi used to do all these, they had a block of these films that they would show it from 1 a.m. onwards. And that's what got me into it. And now Fist of the North Star. But yeah, you're right. For some reason, I've never come across Akira. And it makes me laugh. As you say about the fact that this is an animation, and most animation back then was Disney and things like that. Some of the things in this film, the fact these kids are under 15, right?
Yeah, which by the animation I don't think is clear, but they obviously call it out numerous times that they're 14, 15.
Well, because they say you've come to this school, you're under 15. That's what made me, because no sooner they said that, then Tetsuo picked up his missus, stole I wanted to call him Akira, stole Canada's bug. Then these under 15-year-olds get accosted by what must be older men, get her top ripped off.
Yeah, she gets punched in the face as well.
And then she gets punched in the face. So this is an underage girl getting
beaten up
and getting made topless, getting beaten up.
Yeah, borderline sexually abused.
It's film. And you're just thinking, Jesus Christ! It's just like you wouldn't pick as a kid when you were watching this. You wouldn't pick up these things now, and I'll give you that. But as you're watching as I'm watching this as a 38-year-old man, I'm thinking these kids are under 50. And again, it's the distant future. But
yeah, of course,
not just so much those themes as well. But you can definitely tell this was made in the 80s because the way they treat their women.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
Every time a woman spoke, it was shut up.
But the thing is, this is for all the pretty lights, and futuristic landscape. This is a dystopian future. There's no two ways about it. And a lot of that is, and you know, for regardless of what happens in the middle and the fact that maybe they try and cram too much in, is how much of this world is established through visual design in the first 15 minutes. Like, there's no exposition. There's just a battle through the city, this gorgeously animated city. The battle, like the school, the fact that everything's run down, the neighborhoods, obviously, like you said, the relation, you know, the fact that these kids are 15 and they're just going insane. You know, the rebellions, which you only get hints at early doors, which really did feel like probably enough. You didn't need the stuff later on. But they do so much of the heavy lifting in terms of world building, all visually in the first 20 minutes. Like I said, before it does start to get a little bit weighed down with too many big ideas, I mean, I would say the first 30 minutes and the last 30 minutes arguably move at such a clip, and they fit in so much. And it's so lean in those moments that it does become almost galling when it puts such an emphasis on trying to squeeze so much story into that middle section, which arguably doesn't quite work. I can get away with it. I still enjoy it. I got to be honest. Like, I love this film back to front, but I can totally understand your criticisms. And a friend of mine, I mean, when I post about this, Ross, it was the first thing he said was like, the middle section's totally saggy. And of course, watching it again with a more critical eye, you're like, it really is. It's exactly what you said. And so I can't escape my nostalgia for it, or the fact that I've read the manga. I know the wider story. So I get my brain is automatically filling in the gaps.
But I've said to you,
but for you, it won't.
But I've said to you the same on numerous podcasts. I can't take away the nostalgia from the film. Do you know what I mean? Because you can't with certain things. So I do agree. I think what we need to do, though, is give a brief nutshell synopsis on this film, because we've talked a lot about the visuals. We've talked a lot about where it ebbs and flows and everything like that. So basically, you've got this motorcycle gang who are all under 15, led by Canada, is cool. As you already put out, this is the alpha male. This is the one that people want to be. He's got the bike, the
coat.
You have to shift. You have to change gear above 5,000 RPM all the time.
Well, yeah, it's specifically said. It's not like he just rides that bike because he's the cool kid, because he looks cool. The suggestion is he rides it because he's the only one who can ride it. Yeah. Like, it's so difficult to ride, and he's the only one with the skill to do it. And Tetsuo tries to do it, and he's like, oh, he can't do it. And like you said, he has that moment when he tries to figure it out. But again, you know, there's the start of this film is all about establishing that relationship, that dynamic, as it were. There are other characters, other members in the bike gang, but really all the emphasis is on those two.
But that's it. I didn't get that, watching this. Mm-hmm. All right, I got it, because to me, they were antagonistic towards each other. And it was only towards the end of the film, and we'll get that when I go back to the synopsis in a second, that you realize, because it seemed that Canada was only trying to do this to get to the girl at the point.
There are elements of that, but that's what I love about their relationship. It doesn't sugarcoat things. Like, he is a 14, 15-year-old kid. Yeah, Canada's totally thinking with his dick. Yeah. But you can see in those moments, like, he's still the tough kid. He's the leader of a bike gang. Like, these aren't nice kids.
No.
But he does have that clear, like, that close relationship with Tetsuo. And of course, you know, you can't get far from the fact that Tetsuo is maybe a bit of a loser. And he knows he is, and he wants to be cool, but he's just not. And that is what, rather than it being like, oh, we're best friends in the world and we're going to be forced to fight each other, they do have an antagonistic, relationship, but that's because of the kind of kids they are. They live in an antagonistic world, you know. This isn't sunshine and lollipops and, oh, let's share memories together. They had horrible childhoods. They're just trying to survive. And on the surface, you have to act tough because you're in a gang. But I think there's always those hints that underneath all that is that close relationship between the two of them. But as you say, there's so much complexity built into that relationship, and so much, you know, anger from Tetsuo in particular, because he wants to be cooler. And he sees, like, I always get the idea that he loves Canada, but he hates the fact that he's not him. And he wants to be him so much.
I appreciate that you start to feel that towards the end, but I don't feel that at the beginning at all. All, I don't feel. I just feel that they're two antagonistic people in the same game. And Tetsuo wants to take over. He wants the cool bike, and he wants to take over the gang. That's the kind of thing that I get from it.
That you took from it. So I always took that. He doesn't want to take over the gang. He just wants to be on a level pegging.
Yeah, and I see that Canada as you get to the end. But
yeah, and then obviously at the end, it gets worse and worse. His mental state gets worse and worse, and by the end, he gets caught up in just an obsession with power, like so many others do.
Let's go back to the synopsis then. So you get the first motorbike fight. You got the capsules, aren't they? The capsules versus the clowns.
The clowns.
But during this motorbike fight, there's also a riot going on, and there's also one of these imps. What did you call them?
Espers.
One of these espers is liberated, but it turns out they don't want to be liberated.
It's Takeshi.
Takeshi is liberated from his home or whatever, and he's taken by the rebellion, and it comes in then that Takeshi is run over by Tetsuo. God, there's a lot of T's in this moment.
Yeah. He's hit by Tetsuo, and some of his power is basically imprinted.
And what they say then is, there's a bit of Akira in all of us. So when you open up to him, you can either be good, like the three little Estries are, or you can be like Tess. So basically, anyway, he gets a bit of...
Because they're different every time.
He gets a bit of that power. Yeah. And then the rest of the film goes on where he's learning to control this power. He's becoming a bit more evil. He's held by the government. He learns of Akira. Mm-hmm. So he wants to free Akira, not knowing that Akira is a couple of glass.
Well, everybody wants to. The big kind of thing you take from it is that all of these characters, whether it be the resistance, whether it be the military, whether it be Tetsuo, everybody wants to release the power of Akira, but everybody really wants to do it for their own means. The same with the doctor. What's his name?
I just given a brief synopsis. We can go back to all. I was just giving a brief synopsis.
Absolutely. But. Yeah. So of course you've got these espers, and they give him power. It's kind of, as you say, through contact, he becomes open to the idea of Akira. But the difference is there, I guess, is that those kids, and again, it's not made abundantly clear in the film, is that their powers are being controlled by the colonel, by the government, by the military.
Because it looked like the colonel was more like a father figure. Wow.
They are, because. And again, I'll just explain this in the middle, just so in case it's not clear to everyone. And obviously, it's going to be tricky for you because it's the first time you've watched it. But the idea is that they were all part of the three espers. So it was Kyoko, Masura, and Takashi. Those three and Akira were the only four kids who basically survived a government testing program on psychic powers. And what happened was Akira's powers, in particular, obviously got so out of hand that it led to an explosion, which everyone assumed was a nuclear explosion, which led to World War III.
Yeah.
So they didn't know how to deal with the power of Akira. Akira's exploded. That's why they have the body parts later in the film. But what they do then is they try and suppress the powers of those three kids. And that's why they've aged so much. Like that's all due to the drugging and the control of the government. But of course, these kids are still kids, and they're still acting as their guardians. And they'll think that they're acting in their best interest because they're basically saying, we can't have another Kira, so we need to keep you in check, even if it does make you an old, wrinkly little kid. But none of this is made particularly clear.
Is that why they were trying to scare him by being a teddy bear covered in jizz? And then...
Yeah, they're trying to get control of him because essentially that's what happens, because obviously Tetsu is getting more and more powerful, but he's escaped the facility, so he's no longer under their control. Okay. So, of course, he's just getting more and more powerful, and the kids have seen what happened with Akira in the past, and obviously everybody has their own kind of plans and, whatever kind of thing. But the idea is that Tetsuo is going to get more and more powerful, and something horrendous is going to happen. So everyone's trying to stop him. So his friends are just trying to get their friends back, like Canada. But then, of course, the military, the resistance to a certain extent, everyone wants to get to Akira. They can see Tetsuo as a way to get to that. And it all leads to this big, after, of course, the jizz fight with the robots, which is a fantastic scene, by the way.
It is great. So I will reiterate what I'm meaning by that is basically one night Tetsuo's sleeping, he's having bad dreams, and then the three espers I will get it by the end of this. They didn't name them. The three espers. They didn't name them.
I don't think they refer to it as espers in the film. No. I'm pretty sure that it's not actually.
So they're trying, as Liam just said, they're trying to keep him in his place so he doesn't become an Akira. So by doing that, they're trying to scare him, and they project these weird monsters. One of them is a teddy bear. The reason why, because honestly,
but the music in that scene as well, it looks great.
But
and
it turns out
that music, the brum 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 brum, like, so the music in this film is fantastic. But I think in that scene in particular, it's so creepy and like they capture the tone perfectly.
Yeah, but it turns out it's milk, not jizz. But then all of a sudden he opens the door and
It'd be weird if it was jizz.
It looks like the weirdest bukkake party ever. You just get these weird kids covered in white stuff.
yeah,
it's
just, let's just stop that there. But I get where you're going with that.
Yeah. So you can see what I took from this film a lot, but
yeah.
But I really enjoyed them. The best I can say is when Tetsuo became Super Saiyan.
Yeah, they really do all out, and there is that period before he gets all gross and stuff. When he goes to the, I mean, it's in the build-up before, because obviously it's all leading to the Olympic Stadium. But after that fight in particular, this movie goes full-on horror, like body horror in particular. It's almost like a kind of Paul Verhoeven movie turned up to 1,000. Like, when he's killing the guards, he's doing it horrendously. That scene in the hallway, like, he just explodes everybody. There's like bits of arm hanging off the roof, and there would obviously been violence before that in this movie, but it really escalates from that point when Tetsuo's losing control and he's becoming, it's even before he gets power hungry, it's when he's just kind of, he doesn't know what to do with his power.
When he's
like, get away from me, and just kind of swings his arm and everyone just dies in front of him. It's quite horrible.
There's a lot of, because there's a lot of building falling and just big chunks of building landing on people and just popping.
And I'm not sure if any film has done destruction better than this film. Like, the fact that it's done with cell animation as well. You think of like earlier in the film when what the hell's his name? The little Takashi, when he screams, it's like no, and like all the glass breaks. Yeah. And there's one scene where it's like a giant like an advertising can like falls down. I still think that looks spectacular. And obviously when Kanji goes crazy and like buildings are just falling down, it just looks spectacular.
You know what looked great? When they're having the riots at the beginning of the film and they're releasing the gas. I mean, the one thing that made me laugh is when that guy shot a gas canister straight into a guy's face and he just flew.
He totally smokes him,
But then when you go to a bird's eye view of the city then, and the riot gas is enveloping, sorry, big words. Right. Is enveloping the city. It looks like The Blob from the Kevin Dillon film, the 1988 Kevin Dillon remake.
Where
it's just sucking everything in. It looks, that really caught my eye. That caught my attention. I thought that was great.
No, I mean, there's so many. And that is the thing, as you say, even if you're not the biggest fan of the narrative, and as I said, I think even manga aside, I think it's a film which benefits from multiple viewings. There is just so many great visual moments in this film. And I think that's arguably maybe the reason why it's not being remade, or the fact that people have struggled to do it. There's not been many video games, anything like that. I think it's because it's become in popular culture more a movie of moments and visual motifs than it has about the story. I don't think when people talk about Akira, they get caught up in the complexities of the story. I think they literally just think, oh, the bike was cool. Oh, the bit when Tetsuo goes insane. Usually when people have, or artists have taken something specifically from this film, quite often it is from Tetsuo's descent into power mad's insanity towards the end of the film. It's the visuals of that. It's his destruction. It's, the way he reacts in particular towards the end of the film when he has that kind of like almost, super villain, just explosion of power when he's just absolutely destroying everyone. That's the bit that's arguably what they take most. That, and of course the futuristic kind of elements of Neo.
It's as I said when I said that he went Super Saiyan, which is a Dragon Ball reference. But when his hair just started to grow then, and then he gave himself that supervillain shawl.
Even as like the red glow thing. Like it is so Dragon Ball Z. And that is the thing, let's be clear, Akira has influenced as much Japanese culture as it has Western culture. But it's weird that you mention Dragon Ball Z. I mean, do you actually like anime then? Because just out of interest, are you an anime fan?
So I'm an anime film fan.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same.
Not an
exactly
anime, like, because I can't, like, and I apologize if I upset anyone with this. I can't watch a full 20-minute Dragon Ball episode where the main guy Goku is just
Goku
is just powering up. I remember watching 20 minutes. He was just powering up, and then it went. Yeah. Like, I can't do any of that.
All they do is no, I'm exactly the same. My biggest issue with the TV shows, I often like because I love the aesthetic and I love the idea of Dragon Ball Z or something like that, or Naruto or whatever. But then you watch it, and as you say, a fight scene, you think, oh, a big fight's coming. And then they stand there, they power up, they'll look at each other, and they'll go, they'll just make noises. They'll have a lot of inner monologue. And then the episode's over. And you're like, when the fuck are these going to fight? And they'll drag a fight out over like 5 episodes. I'm like, I have not got enough hours in my fucking life. But what I do love, as I say, I haven't watched tons, but like the really top quality Japanese animated movies. I mean, obviously I love Studio Ghibli, but I almost think of them as their own unique beast. But there is like an aesthetic attached to it, which I absolutely adore. Actually, the only TV show I am a big fan of, and it's probably because...
Can I guess?
Go for it.
One Punch Man?
Absolutely. But absolutely bang on, because all it does is it sends up and makes all fun of all the tropes that I hate from Japanese animation. Like, the whole thing is, like you said, that thing where they spend 20 minutes powering up, whereas One Punch Man just goes in, they have this big speech, he punches them once and they just explode. Yeah. It's so self-aware of those like ridiculous tropes. But even the best movies, like one of the most recent ones, like Makoto Shinkai, like Your Name and Weathering with You, the recent big hits. I love those films, but they still struggle with that overly wrought melodramatic tone, which Japanese animation can fall foul of. So there are issues with that. But the one thing I would say, watching this and the subsequent animated films that I watched, like in the late 80s, early 90s, is it's given me a love for what I can only refer to as a Japanese aesthetic. And that isn't specific to anime. That's just Japan. Like, I love Japanese culture in general. But I've got this thing, like, I like the look of like a Japanese street or a Japanese restaurant, or like sometimes, like watching the Olympics, they're doing the road races. It's just a road. And I'm like, it just looks cool.
You're one of the only people I know who follows the Japanese baseball as well.
Oh yeah, Japanese baseball, all sorts. And I think a big part of that is the Japanese clearly having a love for basically it's what I refer to a love of the mundane and the everyday. And that's what I love about, like, when I look at it, I'm like, why am I so interested in what most would consider a mundane element of Japanese life? And it's because, like, if you go and watch these films, they put so much detail into mundane items. Like, you think of, Makoto Shinkai, for instance, you think of Your Name. The famous takeaway from that film is it's a stairwell. It's just a stairway in the middle of the city, just a nothing thing. But it's drawn with such love and attention that it's become this thing. Or Japanese food. They put so much effort into recreating Japanese food. And I think it all comes back to this film. As much as it's beautiful, as much as you have these big bombastic action moments, the attention to detail in the mundane is absolutely exemplary. And I think it's just rubbed off on the rest of my life.
I call bullshit on all of that. The only reason that you love the Japanese for anything is the fact that you're 6'7" and you can get pictures of little men just staring up at you every time you go.
I tell you what, dude, seriously, you would think I go to Japan and people would lose their mind with all that Godzilla shit. It doesn't happen. The Japanese are too fucking polite. You hardly get a peep. Do you know who it is? It's the Chinese. The Chinese lose their shit. I've been all over Asia, and you get different levels of interest in me being very tall. But the only ones who genuinely lose their mind are Chinese tourists. When I went to China, it was just the Chinese. But when I went to Tokyo the first time, I was in what was the tallest building in Tokyo at the time. It was before the Skytree was built. I've been there since. You're in like the top bit where you've got like the panoramic views. And most people weren't paying attention. And then all of a sudden I run into a group of 12, I think, it's more than that, 15, 20 Chinese tourists. I had to have a photo with every single one of them. It was, honest to God.
You started charging at that point.
Dude, honestly, by the end, I was like, this is what it must feel like to be famous.
Can you imagine?
Because one person came over and they were like, can I have a photo with you? I'm like, yeah, sure. And then their friend said, yeah, me too. And then all of a sudden I realized this half circle of Chinese tourists had surrounded me, and they had basically created a line, and they were having a photo with me one at a time. And by the end, I'd spent so much time smiling for photos that the side of my face was starting to twitch. And of course, I go over to my friends after I've taken like the 17th picture. And I was with two of my friends. I was like, dude, did you just see that? And like, no, they were just looking out the other window. I was like, dude, I was a celebrity for like 20 minutes and you missed it? Motherfuckers. Can
you imagine?
So yeah.
You're 6'7", I'm 6'4". If we were over there, people would have lost their shit.
Oh, they absolutely lost their shit. But I should mention, sorry, just while it's on my mind, the fact that you can't escape. And you get it with a lot of Japanese animation. We've already said about skepticism, about the military, about the politicians, about basically everyone. It's the fact that this is so intertwined with what happened at Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
Yeah.
You know, you think of like the most obvious kind of analogy for nuclear war is Godzilla. That's the incredibly uncertain war. But I mean, this film starts with a nuclear war. And it's a trope of Japanese animation of like these dystopian futures, but often not necessarily dystopian, but they're dealing with something horrendous that's happened in the past, often nuclear-based. And obviously this film is another one that deals with it.
How lovely did they do it? How lovely did they do it World War III? But how lovely did they do it? You get the explosion, then you just had the write-up that said, after World War III, 2019.
Yeah.
Like, there was no... And the explosion was silent as well. So there was no anything else that...
Well, yeah, that as we mentioned earlier, that is the strange thing about this film, is that the pacing for the first act and the third act is exemplary. The storytelling is so tight, so concise, but that middle section is a flabby beast. It's almost like a completely different film. And as I said, with the graphic novel, that's exactly what it is. You've got these really tight sections at the beginning and end of the film. And I think maybe that's why I was willing to forgive, especially when I was younger, the middle section, because there's still enough action and intrigue for you to keep ticking along. But what you really remember when you come away from this film, and I think when most people look back at this film, what you really are remembering is the first 30 and the last 30. Yeah. And those are the bits when this film is borderline, I would say, a masterpiece, because this is one of my favorite films of all time. So, but I would say those are the sections of the film which are objectively outstanding, but then there's that middle section which you just have to deal with.
Before we move on, I do want to talk about the battle at the end, but I just wanted to say, when you said then, you're talking about your experience, and you said, I've been all over Asia, I honestly thought you were going to break into song, I've Been Everywhere by Johnny Cash.
That'd be an interesting. I'm not sure if this podcast needs me singing, in fairness, but
right. Let's talk about this battle, because I've been saying throughout this podcast that I want to talk about this battle. When he finally gets to the Olympic Stadium, where Akira is buried in some sort of weird time capsule kept at freezing temperatures below the Olympic Stadium, and you've got, as we've already said, Super Saiyan Tetsuo going up against Canada on his bike.
And the army.
And the army. Okay. He goes up against the army first. Totally destroys the army. But then it's Canada who is able to take him down a peg or two with a laser gun. Now, I missed this. Yeah. Where did he get that laser?
I can't remember now.
Because he just shows up with it.
And it's a badass laser, because it has like an 80s mobile phone. Like it comes with its own like battery pack and everything. But it's just that. But again, I wonder with this idea, with this with that final battle, is if Tetsuo really wanted to kill Canada, could he have?
Yes.
And I'm just like, I wonder with that. But it's just like, there's part of him which obviously wants to show him up, but does he? I'm not convinced he ever actually wants to kill Canada.
That's where I started to get their relationship. As you got that, and as I said, I didn't see the relationship at the beginning, but as you got it, the way Tetsuo is taking out the army, like they're nothing to it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you got Canada on his bike with his laser, who's able to do damage. Just because Tetsuo really doesn't want to kill his friend at this point.
No, I don't think he does. And you see it the moment, and as cool as, like, let's be clear, Tetsuo is cool as shit in those final scenes. Like you said, where he makes the cape, his hair go, and it is, like you said, totally Super Saiyan.
He looks amazing then when he's got his robotic arm. Even though his robotic arm does nothing,
it just looks cool. Well, his arm gets blown off, in fairness. So, he has to create...
His arm gets blown off, but then he creates his own robotic arm, but then there's no fight with that robotic arm. That arm just then turns him into that weird... It's the beginning of that weird blob monster,
Yeah. And that is the thing. As soon as his body can't control the power inside him anymore. That is like how quickly he turns on, like he wants to be helped by Canada. He doesn't want to hurt Canada anymore. He becomes almost like the scared kid that he is again, where he's just like, okay, I'm in over my head kind of thing.
And we need to say how he loses his arm, because they shoot a space laser at him.
They sure do.
A satellite space laser, they shoot at him. And then as they're gearing up for a second one, all of a sudden he can fly into outer space, or it's a
he flies into
space. Out into outer space and then take out the space laser and come back down and give himself a robotic arm. That looked great. And I've got it in fact, so I won't go too much into it. But when he was into space, that was like scientifically correct with no sound or anything that was.
It wasn't Star Wars space. It was legit space. And they do enough like where he's surrounded by that red glow, which again looks very Super Saiyan. But I guess the idea that he's almost created his little bit of atmosphere, so he can actually go into space and survive without having. And again, it's back to the idea that when this film's at its best, it explains things visually rather than having to do it with exposition dumps or anything like that.
And the only time they needed to explain anything was when Akira was able to build himself back up. And then he started to create his own universe. And then you had to have the
Espers.
Yeah. I was going to say Estries again.
Estries, whatever,
the Espers then explained that Akira's taking Tetsuo away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's doing a similar, like basically it's what happened the first time is he created his own alternate universe, Akira did. And everyone again mistook it for a nuclear explosion. And basically he destroys the city again, but he does so, obviously at the behest of the Espers who are praying to Akira, asking him to come back and basically saying, listen, if you don't take Tetsuo with you, then he's going to end up destroying the city regardless. So you do have that outlet of power again, that uncontrollable outlet of power where, much of the city is destroyed again. But there is enough control there that, the Espers send the colonel to the edge of the city. Obviously, Canada ends up going into this alternate universe as well, but is sent back because, again, he inherently doesn't want to hurt Canada.
Does Tetsuo's missus survive? Because she gets swallowed up.
I thought she went with him to the other side. And again, it's that idea, like, I don't think she necessarily died, but she just went with him to this, what's her name? Kaori? Is that her name? Kaori? That's the way it's pronounced anyway.
Calorie.
But, Kaori. Not calorie, but it sounds like calorie, but it's spelled Kaori, but they pronounce it, and certainly in the English dub, Kaori.
Yeah. I do apologize the fact I'm butchering all these names, by the way.
Well, it's a weird thing, and it's just something I want to cover before we wrap anything up, is that one of the uniquest elements of this film, if you grew up there, obviously it's not relevant to you, is that the pronunciations, the voices, even the dialogue, when I watched it, and when many watched it back in, because this film was released in 88, but it got a limited run in the US in 89, but really it was 91 in the UK when it came to VHS, was that it had an original streamlined picture dub, which was attached to the VHS and the original theatrical cut. And it is very different from what you would have watched today. It was completely different voice actors, and a lot of the dialogue is actually very different. And many, like myself, have a soft spot for the original dub. Okay. It's slightly cheesy at times. It makes less sense. They don't do such a good job of explaining things, and it's not as close to the original dialogue as the new. I think it's called the Pioneer dub, which came out in 2001 to coincide with the DVD release and the limited run re-released in the cinema. So it's quite bizarre. Like, can you think of any other film where a movie you've watched so many times, you absolutely adore it, and then all of a sudden it sounds completely different with a different script and different voice work? It was quite mad. I'd never experienced that before or since. But it's one of those things, like, I remember suddenly having this new dub, and you think how much, as we said before, is attached to nostalgia. And so much nostalgia and attachment to how the characters sounded. And then all of a sudden, that's removed for... Yeah, sure. Voice work that is more sensible, but it's just not the one you grew up with. It's such a bizarre setup.
It is mad that it's had 3 voice actors for each character.
Yeah, it's crazy. And as I say, the easy thing would be to say, "Oh, why don't you listen to the Japanese dub?" And I could never watch a live action film dubbed. I just can't do it. It's impossible. But with animated films, it's it's much easier because obviously the lip syncing is not quite there. You know, it's animated. You know, it's most of the Studio Ghibli films I actually watch in English because I want to keep my emphasis on what's happening on screen and the animation. So yeah, I could watch it in the original Japanese dub, but I grew up watching the English dub, and that is how I watch it and always have watched Akira. So yeah, it is bizarre that suddenly you have a completely different voice cast. And as I said, objectively, it's better, but some of it, it's not as fun.
It's mad though, because I found out who the English dub of Canada was. Mm-hmm. And it turns out the one I listened to is the Pioneer cut, as you just said, the one that was done in 2001.
Yeah.
And that's Johnny Young Bosch, who was the second Black Power Ranger.
Oh, right.
Yeah. That's the only other thing I can link him to. Was he the Power Ranger after he took over from the original Black Ranger. Yeah.
Oh, so I have no connection to the voice cast other than just their voices. It's like, I'm not like, oh, that sounds like so-and-so. I'm just like, well, that's Canada, that's Akira, not Akira because he didn't say shit, Tetsuo, whatever kind of thing. But yeah, strange setup all the same.
I'm good to move on if you want to move on, mate. I don't know if unless there's
well, as I said, you know, I think the ending to this film, as I said, is exceptional, and you know, I think there's enough there to allow me to forget, and hopefully many to forgive the slightly flabby middle section. But there's a lot to take in this film, and it's impossible to disconnect it from the manga. And obviously, for you and I, we're coming at it from such different. I'm coming from it from. I've seen this film hundreds of times. I've seen the original dub. I've seen the new dub. I've read the manga, and then you watched it yesterday. It's quite bizarre how that's going to obviously lead to incredibly different experiences.
But again, it would be turned around, I suppose, if it was Fist of the North Star, which I have watched probably 15 times.
Yeah, but Fist of the North Star is a simpler story, and I don't think you necessarily have to have read a 6-volume epic manga to get the best of it. So, you know, the fact that the whole story about the fact that the manga started before the anime, but then it finished after it's a weird story, man. It's a lot to get caught up on. Yeah. So yeah, if you want to get the best out of Akira, you really need to be all in on it. But that's a tough sell. But anyway, what's next on the list? Facts or legacy?
I'd rely on you for legacy, mate, because all I know from Akira, aside from trying to do a remake that never happened, is that basically. So if you've got legacy up there, we can cover legacy straight away. Yeah,
I'll do it quick. I mean, obviously there are no sequels. We've already talked about the fact there's no live action film, and I think it's because obviously you've got a budget problem. The other issue is, like, again, could you make this work as a 2-hour live action movie? I think it would be tricky. And I think even though there was talk about it for years, and I think Leonardo DiCaprio's production company was attached to it, I don't think the Ghost in the Shell live action movie has done it any favors. One, because obviously it wasn't a massive hit. And two, of course, now the whole cultural appropriation thing, you know, or white actors playing in Japanese roles. Like, is this film ever going to get a 200 million budget with a purely Japanese cast? I don't think it is. And then would people be happy if you took the story and moved it to, say, LA? I don't think people want to see that either. So I'm not sure if this is ever going to get a live action movie, but in terms of its impact on popular culture, I mean, we've already covered it to a certain extent, but you can see it in music video. I mean, Kanye West has kind of cited it as one of his favorite films, but his stronger video is basically the testing video, the testing scene on Tetsuo. The Scream video has Tetsuo, Michael Jackson, Janet Jackson, that had him falling out the window. Rian Johnson cited it as a direct influence over Looper, and I think you can totally see it in that film. But I think the closest thing we've ever got to a live-action Akira film in terms of capturing the tone and very much that emphasis on the relationship between, best friends and somebody getting all this unwanted power and the effect on them is actually Josh Trank's Chronicle. Now, I think a lot of people, a lot of people when they think of Josh Trank now, sadly think of that terrible Fantastic Four remake. Yep. But I can assure you, before he made that, he made Chronicle, and Chronicle is a fantastic superhero film and really captures the tone of Akira, but simplifies it into that core relationship.
And you want to see a young Michael B. Jordan act so well, it's in Chronicle.
That was the first thing I saw him in, and he was fantastic in that. The whole cast is great. It's low budget, but it totally belies its low budget to deliver a visually fantastic film. And what's the name of the guy in the lead? The guy basically Tetsuo.
Dane DeHaan.
Dane DeHaan, like he's fantastic.
Yeah,
in crime. I think he's a great actor. Yeah. Regardless, I'm not sure how many great roles he's going to get because he's been in a few too many stinkers. But Chronicle is the closest thing I think we've ever got to a live-action Akira film, and you can feel that Akira's influence through every moment of that film, undoubtedly. The only other thing, and it's probably the one most people would have seen, is in Stranger Things. 11 is clearly influenced by the Espers and by Akira, especially in the first series where you have flashbacks to 11 being tested on, and she's wearing like the cap with like all that is visually taken directly from Akira. So as I said earlier, other than maybe Chronicle, which is maybe the one film which thought, okay, let's try and remake at least elements of Akira, most movies, most music videos, and there was The Matrix, of course, I forgot to mention that again. They just take those visual elements, which again is what I think most people remember when they think of Akira.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I said, massive legacy, but without actually having a direct legacy, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The last idea, to just go back to the live action film, the last I heard was Taika Waititi was going to do it back in like 2017. It was meant to be released in like 19, but then they put it on hold for the Thor films, I think. So
yeah,
I wonder if
it's
still on the cards.
Ghost in the Shell came out. I'd be amazed if we get a Western-led live-action remake of Akira. I really would be.
When it comes to, as you said, the cultural appropriation, the worst offender, I believe, it has to be M. Night Shyamalan's Avatar.
Yeah, that was a weird one, but I mean, we live in a world. I mean, I guess it was a terrible film as well. But we live in a world now where obviously any character who is supposedly, say from the source material, is of say Asian descent, is played by a white character. It's just seen as whitewash and is getting torn to pieces now. So the idea of taking such an important Japanese cultural export and just making it white Akira, fucking forget about it. That's not happening.
I will put it out there that I absolutely love the Avatar TV series.
I've never seen it.
I think it's fantastic. If you ever get a chance, watch it. It is so good. It is great.
I have seen the film though.
Please distance yourself. Yeah, distance yourself from the film. And watch.
I think I will.
Yeah, I think it's on Amazon Prime, so you should be able to catch it up. But all right, so do you want to move on to facts?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Yeah. Okay, so I've only got a couple. Mm-hmm. This was one of the first Japanese anime films to have the characters' voices recorded before they were animated. While this is typical practice in the US, in Japan, the animation is generally produced first, which I thought was interesting. Yeah.
Well, as we said earlier, in terms of the number of drawings that were created to deliver each second of action, this was the first film which really moved it up into that top tier, comparable with the. Well, let's be clear, it was Disney back in the 80s, and there was no going back after this, because I was the same as everyone else. I kind of associated Japanese animation with slightly shoddy animation kind of thing, and then suddenly you get this. It was just such a big jump, such a massive jump in quality.
Which goes into my next fact really well. That was a good segue.
Thanks.
The movie consists of 2,212 shots and 160,000 single pictures, 2 to 3 times more than usual, using 327 different colors. Another record in animation, 50 of which were exclusively created for the film. The reason for this statistic is that most of the movie takes place at night, a setting that is traditionally avoided by animators because of the increased color requirements.
Yeah, I mean, you think of, again, the neon lights, the color of the city. This isn't one of those cities that's bathed in darkness. It's all color. Yeah, it might be shot at night, but it's bright all the time. And it's, again, whatever you might think of the film, on a tactical level, this was groundbreaking on just about every level.
Yeah. So the movie takes place in 2019 and depicts Neo-Tokyo creating a new Olympic stadium. Coincidentally, Tokyo was scheduled to host the 2020 Summer Olympics before the COVID-19 pandemic delayed them until 2021, which, as I've already said, as we're recording this now, those Olympics are currently going on. This next one I'm going to save, which will segue us lovely into the next section. Akira means bright, intelligent, clear in Japanese. The production budget was nearly 10 million, a record sum for a Japanese animation film.
Yeah, unheard of all the time. And again, that all comes back to the economic boom we were talking about earlier.
At one point in the 90s, Sony contemplated a live-action version of the film, but scrapped the idea when the projected budget went north of $300 million.
Yeah, this isn't going to be a cheap film. I mean, I still think, despite we said they're not going to be a film, I'm just going to say the only way I think this gets made is if one of the big, Amazon, Netflix decides to go, okay, we're going all in on this.
It needs to be
because this isn't about Hollywood anymore. We're talking about a global audience. And you're just like, if anyone's going to pump in enough money to make a Japanese-led Akira live action movie with the budget it deserves, then it's going to be someone like Netflix, I think.
Yeah. So the computer sounds which can be heard during Tetsuo's body scan were taken from Mother, the computer in Alien. I thought that was interesting.
Oh, yeah. Did you know that? That's awesome.
Going back to your re-release, the film was re-released in 2001 with a new voice dub and soundtrack, reportedly costing over $1 million.
Damn.
In the scene where Canada is the jukebox, you can see the logos of 3 famous classic rock bands. Can you remember them?
The Doors, Cream, and I don't know what the other one is.
Oh, Led Zeppelin.
Oh, that wasn't a bad effort, though.
That was good, mate. That was good.
That was all right. Why the fuck did I remember Cream but not Led Zeppelin?
But here it is. So the shot of Canada's bike slide into a stop away from the camera in the opening bike chase sequence is considered to be the most referenced shot in animation.
100%.
Homages appear in such shows as Teen Titans, Gennady Tartakovsky's Star Wars, Clone Wars, Samurai Jack, Batman the Animated Series, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Adventure Time, The Simpsons, and even Pokemon.
Dude, I mean, if you want to do a cool slide, like that's what you're aiming for. I mean, shit, that bike is so iconic. It was even in I forgot to mention Legacy. It was in Ready Player One, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes.
Yeah. Because it's just, and again, it belongs, to my mind at least, it belongs in that category. Like, you think of the other vehicles that are in that scene in Ready Player One, like the DeLorean, Ecto One, and then it's Canada's bike. And I'm like, yeah, I put it absolutely in that category. And it comes back to the fact that, I mean, we put up on the site, this might have my favorite movie poster of all time. And it's not big, it's not kinetic, it's no explosions. It's just Canada from above, just walking down the street towards that fucking bike. And it's just like, I had that picture framed back in my old place. And I'm like, that legitimately might be my favorite movie poster of all time. Because what it does, again, is just captures the quintessential coolness of this film. And that is what stands out maybe most, is just the fact that on a purely aesthetic standard, this film is just cool as shit, man.
Is that the alternate poster you sent me? Is it that?
Yeah.
The name Tetsuo literally means Iron Man in Japanese, a foreshadowing of the indestructible powers and metallic body parts he ultimately acquires.
Yeah, there is actually a live-action movie called Tetsuo Iron Body, something. It's like a proper body horror black and white movie. Very, very bizarre.
So 2 more. This one's a long one, and I'll go back to the one that'll segue us into the next section. The scene in which Tetsuo flies up into outer space to destroy the satellite is very scientifically accurate, in the sense that there's little to no noise once he leaves Earth, due to the fact there's no medium for which sound to travel through in space that's audible to the human ear because it's a vacuum. With few exceptions given the right circumstances, such as someone hearing the muffled sounds of something touching or hitting the exterior of their ship or spacesuit. This is very impressive for a sci-fi animated film from 1988, seeing as how live-action movies like Gravity and Interstellar have only recently begun paying more noticeable attention to that technical aspect of space almost 3 decades later.
Yeah. No one was doing this in 88. Yeah. And it all comes back to this idea that this movie felt like it came from the fucking future. It absolutely did.
So the last one then, the music for the film was completed before any of the composers saw a frame of film or read the script. The music did have to be edited to fit some scenes, though. So that's that's mad. So they gave him a title. Probably gave him the manga.
Yeah.
And said, do a soundtrack. In
fairness, if you're handed the manga and you're provided the aesthetics, the tone, there's a lot to work with there. It's not like they've just handed him just the title and said, off to the races. If you were provided with 4 volumes of the sound of the manga, I would argue there's quite a bit to work with. And the fact of the matter is we're in the soundtrack section now, is Geno Yamashiragumi. I hope that's pronounced correctly. I thought he did an absolutely exceptional. I love the soundtrack to this film. The only other one I can think of that kind of like might be as iconic as this in terms of Japanese animation is probably Ghost in the Shell. They actually used the Ghost in the Shell main theme in the BBC coverage of the Olympics, which I thought was very cool. But that use of like 80s future synth combined with like more traditional Japanese music, it's like it is without question a futuristic sound, but it always carries that kind of quintessential sound of Japan, and that carries throughout the entire film. It gets the tone in the film, the fact that it's not one note. It's like sometimes the music's very upbeat, sometimes it's very aggressive, but it's also occasionally ethereal. I mean, even towards the end, it almost becomes religious. Certainly, like there's like a reverential tone to some of the music. When you think of Akira and the fact that a lot of people, obviously, the religious zealots and obviously see him almost as a god, and that is heard, as it were, through the score. So I would say this is one of the most, we all go back to the visuals and stuff, but excuse me, I would say the soundtrack and score for this film is arguably as memorable and iconic as anything else that's come from this film.
Yeah, I can't deny anything you just said then.
Yeah,
that's the best thing for me for soundtrack.
Okay, fair enough. Well, funnily enough, dude, just last week, there's this great charity bookshop around the corner from me, and it's like the best charity bookshop ever, because I don't know who's handing in these books, but you think like one thing that very rarely gets cheap are like graphic novels.
Yeah,
and it's like every time I walk past it, they've got all the classics. Like they'll have like Batman Year One, The Dark Knight Rises, Watchmen, V for Vendetta, and they're selling them for like $3.50. It's unbelievable. And I walk past the window because I always have my head in. Oh, yeah. I already had a lot of them, but I picked up Viva Vendetta just last week, and they have a lot of like hardback Stephen King novels. Okay. I got like the whole collection of the Dark Tower series. I already had them in paperback, but they like these the latest hardback versions selling for like $2.50 each. So I got like the whole selection there, of course. But in the window, they had the original 1989 pressing of the Akira soundtrack, where it's got like JVC on the side. Full once I was like, I'm not listening to CDs anymore, but there's no way I'm not buying that. So I picked up like £3, and I went home. I was like, I wonder how much this goes for. I checked on eBay, and people are selling it for like £50. I got for like £3. Yeah. So I got the. I'm not going to sell it. I mean, it's just a cool thing to have. But yeah, as I said, even the soundtrack to this film's iconic. But it's odd because obviously this leads us into the final section, which is video games.
Yeah,
and you would think a film which is so aesthetically, memorable. It's such a big impact on culture, both in Japan, obviously, and in the West, that there's basically no video games. And I know there's a lot of complexity to the story, but like there was a NES game, which was rubbish back in the day. There was an Amiga game, which wasn't very good. There was a cancelled Genesis and SNES game. I've actually got the Akira Psycho Ball for the PS2. I've still got it. It's literally on the shelf right behind me. It's a fucking pinball game. Like, what the fuck? Like, we've run out of ideas. Just to make a pinball game with Akira in it. And, I mean, that's about it. I mean, unless you found anything, there is literally fuck all when it comes to Akira and video games.
It was just
bananas.
It was just the Akira adventure game for the Famicom, which is basically, as you said, the NES game.
Yeah, Famicom NES. Yeah. It was like re-released with a dub in like actually surprisingly late 90s actually, but it was a Famicom game. Yeah,
and it was the Super NES version as an Akira. But that's all I found, to be honest with you. And
I find it insane that in this day and age, you think of the video game whores of this world. I'm thinking very much of what's called Fortnite in particular, where they've just got any old shit goes in there. It's like, how have they not had a Canada skin, or more specifically a bike skin, where you can like drive around on Canada's bike? Why isn't that shown up in more video games and movies? I find that weird in particular.
The only thing I could see this being like, if we were to make it, is Final Fantasy.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I mean, you think of Final Fantasy VII, and Cloud has the bike.
Yeah,
you could just have a sword instead. But yeah, I see what you mean. Obviously, you could deal with the narrative and stuff.
And it, as I've said, this film dragged on. I was not a fan of the story per se. It was more the visuals, but it feels like an epic. And I'm not a Final Fantasy fan, as you already know, but which probably links to the film. But if you were going to put this film as a game, you'd need that kind of sprawling epic. And it would be a Final Fantasy game, I think.
Well, it's weird that you say that because I totally agree with you. I think you either go two ways. You either go big, sprawling epic, and maybe it's a JRPG is the only way to truly deal with the complexities of the narrative and the scale of the story. But what I would do is actually go the opposite way and go, listen, I have no interest in retelling this story. What I would prefer is you strip it all away and just take on one of the coolest elements of the game, and that is the bike racing. Yeah. So what I would like is like a bike-based racer / battle game with very limited narrative, set in Neo-Tokyo and maybe even in the surrounding rural areas, like an open-world racer, and developed by Criterion, the guys who did Burnout and later on basically the best Need for Speed games. And what I'm really thinking of is like the best of Burnout crossed with Need for Speed. You have a limited narrative, but basically you can just free ride your way around the city, get into races and fights with clown gangs. Instead of the police in those games, you run into the clowns and you just get into fights.
You basically want Road Rash / Akira by the sound of
it. But Road Rash, people forget Road Rash is actually shit. So I'm thinking like a modern day game. I want Criterion making it because they're the masters of it. And I'm like, how would you can imagine you drive around, suddenly the clowns show up, you bang into each other, you'd have basic combat. But then equally, you could a lot of it would just be arcade style racing, but just with this gorgeous combination of Neo-Tokyo, you've got the ruins of the bomb site. You could have the rural surrounding areas to mix things up. I'm like, that's the game I want to see. Balls to the story. Like you see, you can have a little bit of story just to kind of fill you in on what's happening then. But it's almost like this isn't about Akira. This isn't about Tetsuo. This is just about gang life in 2019, 31 years after World War III in Neo-Tokyo. That's the game I want to see anyway. But whatever. I needless to say, I don't think that game's getting made. But
no, none of the games that we suggested do need to be made, but they're never getting made. That's the problem.
No, yeah, but this is the thing. Like, if I was Jeff Bezos, it's like instead of going to space, I would just hire Criterion to make the Akira.
Unfortunately, I mean, so many people have signed a petition for him. He's not coming back, is he?
Well, nobody be signed a petition not to have me make my Akira gang-based bike racer made by Criterion. Everyone's going to be on fucking board with that, I can tell you. And you'd be on board because the only thing you don't like about this fucking film is the story. I'm getting rid of the story. I'm just leaving all the cool shit. It's absolutely fine.
In that case, then, let's get on to the ratings for this.
Yeah, I mean, I suspect this is going to be very different. I can't escape my connection to the narrative, to the source material, to my nostalgia, my history with it. For me, at least, it's a 5-star film. Would I encourage other people to watch it? I 100% would, despite the fact that this film does have issues, especially as you found out for the uninitiated. But this film is too iconic, it's too memorable, it's too cool, and as I said, despite the fact that it might have that saggy middle section, I would argue that the first third and the final third of this film are almost perfect. Like, I love them that much.
So I agree with you. The first third and the last third are very good, but the story doesn't hold up for me in the long run. And what saves this for me is the fact that it's visually stunning. It is, It is beautiful, and I will agree. It is so lovely to watch, and that's why I don't want to give it a 2. I don't want to give it, as you love, 2.5. It's a 3. It's a middle of the road. The visuals save this for me. So would I recommend it to others? Artistically, yes, I would recommend it to others just to see what has been done on screen. Because again, I can't stress enough that I watched this film more with my eyes than I did with anything else.
Yeah, I get it, and I don't think it's a coincidence again that, like you said, you enjoyed the first quarter and the first third and the final third. It's like those are arguably the bits with the least narrative. As I said, that first third is like it's more of a show rather than tell. There's very little exposition. It's in the middle section when that all gets quite muddled, and as it comes back to the idea that you can almost have little interest or no connection to the story, but still enjoy this film fundamentally because of that, the high visual standards, because of the iconic visual moments, because of the cool bike, because of the characters, whatever, even if you don't have a narrative connection to those characters.
I totally agree. So
3 stars.
I would recommend it to others. 3 stars for me. 5 stars from you. Recommend it to others. There was never 100%. The way you've talked about this film, as long as I've known you, it was never not going to be a 5-star film from you.
No, but it was interesting rewatching it, and I won't rattle on. I'll let you make your pick for next week. As I said, it's interesting going back and watching it with a more critical eye. And what I mean by that is, almost as if you were to review a film. I can't review a film if I was going to put it out there and say, oh, I just love this film. That's no good. And the fact of the matter is I do love this film. But I was trying to watch it with that mindset of what would it be like, as it were, for you coming to this for the first time, and then suddenly you're watching and going, man, a lot of this doesn't make sense unless you know the source material, unless you've made the attachments. I'm like, if you're watching for this first time, I was like, does this really make sense? I'm like, I'm not sure it fucking does. So there's no two ways about it. This film isn't perfect, but despite its issues, 5 stars for me. Totally 5 stars. But yeah, that's enough of Akira. What are you going to pick next week, sir?
Well, I've got to go with possibly one of the best film of the 80s, and that's not just coming from me. I've never met anyone who doesn't like this film. So it would be interesting to see if anyone does actually say they don't like it. Back to the Future.
No one's going to dislike it. Nobody dislikes Back to the Future. It's amazing that we've gone 23, 24 episodes, whatever it is, and not done Back to the Future at this point, because, as you said, like, everyone loves this film.
If you say you're doing a podcast of movies of the 80s, this is in top 5 where people will go, you're going to cover that. And we've left it to, like you say, episode, 23 at this point?
Yeah, but I think a part of that is probably because we didn't want to blow our load too early.
Yeah.
You don't want to just do, all the big hitters straight out of the gate. You've got to spread out a little bit. You need Akira to get to this. You need 40 hours to then do Aliens kind of thing. You've got to mix that up. It's all to do with pacing. It's all to do with pacing. But yeah, we need a big hitter now, and there are few hitters as big as Back to the Future. And yeah, I mean, spoiler alert, I think we both quite like this film,
yeah,
to say the least. But I'm looking forward to rewatching it, and I think some of the most interesting conversations will be linked to its subsequent legacy and the sequels, which we will invariably cover to one extent or another, and that could be a slightly different conversation. But yeah, the first film, man, what a movie.
Really looking forward to rewatching this. So
the two totally look forward to it. So yeah, guys, if you get a chance, Back to the Future, everybody wants an excuse to rewatch Back to the Future. So get on there, join us next week, and as always, thanks for listening. Oh yeah, and before I forget, because I always forget, here's Rob telling you where you can actually find us.
Yeah, so we're currently on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter under Hey You Guys 80s or at Hey You Guys 80s. And we're also on email at heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any emails, any recommendations, or any reviews you have. But whilst we're on about that, wherever you get your podcasts, please also smash the subscribe button. Yes, I said smash.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Leave us a review and leave us some 5-star ratings as well. But make sure they're 5-star ratings.
Yeah. We're not interested in 1-star. 5-star. If it's not going to be 5-star, don't go smashing anything. Just leave your opinion to yourself. 5-star ratings only. But yeah, if you could do that, we'd really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. See you next week.
Hey, you